Why do some men stay calm, respected, and unshaken while others get dragged through endless games, losing themselves piece by piece? The answer isn't chance. It's knowledge. And the knowledge I'm about to give you will change everything once you know it. She can't dangle love like a prize. She can't manipulate your emotions. She can't keep you trapped because you'll see through it all. Stay with me, because I'm going to reveal 5 truths that will end the games forever and put you back in control of your life. I don't want you to just sit there and passively listen to this. I want this moment to become personal for you. So, before we go any further, take 1 second right now, press like, subscribe, and in the comments, write these words: I refuse to be blind anymore. Because the truth is, most men spend years sleepwalking through relationships, repeating the same painful cycles without ever understanding why they keep ending up hurt, confused, emotionally drained, or replaced. And today, that changes. My name is Lauren, and I want you to hear this clearly before we go deeper. This is not about teaching men to hate women. It's not about manipulation, revenge, or becoming cold-hearted. It's about understanding human behavior, emotional dynamics, and the psychology that quietly shapes modern relationships. Because when you understand the patterns, you stop taking everything personally. You stop reacting emotionally to every shift in affection, every mixed signal, every silent treatment. And that awareness gives you something most people never achieve in relationships: emotional freedom. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt like you gave everything to someone, only to realize it still wasn't enough? Have you ever stayed loyal, stayed available, stayed patient, thinking eventually she would appreciate your effort, only to watch her grow colder while you tried harder? If that pain sounds familiar, you're not alone. And I need you to understand something important. Most men are not losing relationships because they lack love. They're losing themselves because they lack awareness. One man I once spoke to had been in a relationship for 6 years. He paid the bills, supported her emotionally, sacrificed time with his friends, put his own dreams on hold because he believed that devotion guaranteed loyalty. And when she eventually left him, he sat there completely shattered, asking one question over and over again: how could she leave after everything I did? But the deeper truth was painful. He had spent so much time trying to keep her happy that he stopped respecting himself. He became emotionally dependent on her approval. And once a person feels that dependency, the balance quietly shifts. That brings us to the first truth most men never fully understand: the difference between conditional love and genuine love. Most men walk into relationships believing love works the way movies taught them. They believe that if they're loyal enough, patient enough, selfless enough, they'll eventually receive unconditional devotion in return. But real life is more complicated than fantasy. Most relationships are built on conditions, spoken or unspoken. That doesn't make someone evil. It makes them human. Think about how often affection changes when circumstances change. When a man is confident, ambitious, emotionally stable, financially secure, he often receives admiration, warmth, affection, and attention. But what happens when he loses his job, when depression hits, when his energy drops? Suddenly, the relationship can feel different. The tone shifts, the patience disappears, the admiration fades, and many men are devastated because they believed love alone would protect them from human nature. Now listen carefully, because this part matters. Conditional love is not exclusive to women. Men do it too. Men are often drawn to beauty, youth, excitement, validation, emotional comfort. Human beings naturally respond to value. The danger begins when you refuse to acknowledge this reality and instead cling to illusions. A psychologically mature man understands that attraction and attachment are influenced by emotional experience. People are affected by how you make them feel, the stability you bring, the energy you carry, the confidence you embody, and the standards you hold. Once you understand that, you stop blindly overinvesting in people who have not earned your trust. And this is where many men make their biggest mistake. They try to purchase love through sacrifice. They think, if I give more, she'll stay. If I tolerate more, she'll appreciate me. If I become endlessly available, she'll finally choose me. But desperation never creates attraction. It destroys it. I remember hearing about a man who checked his phone every 5 minutes waiting for one woman to reply. Every time she ignored him, he doubled his effort. Longer paragraphs, more compliments, more emotional energy. Meanwhile, she became increasingly distant. Not because he was a bad person, but because his behavior communicated something dangerous. My happiness depends on your attention. And the moment someone feels that level of emotional dependence from you, the dynamic changes. This is why emotionally grounded men move differently. They do not force connections. They observe them. They don't assume words equal loyalty. They pay attention to consistency. They watch how someone behaves during difficult moments, not just easy ones. Because anybody can love you when life is exciting. Anybody can adore you when you're winning. Anybody can praise you when you're useful. But who remains when you're struggling? Who respects you when you say no? Who values you when you stop overgiving? That is where truth reveals itself. And I know some people will hear this and immediately become defensive. They'll say, so should men stop loving deeply? Absolutely not. Deep love is powerful. Loyalty is powerful. Commitment is powerful. But love without self-awareness becomes self-destruction. There's a huge difference between loving someone and abandoning yourself for them. A healthy relationship is not built on one person endlessly sacrificing while the other endlessly receives. Healthy love requires reciprocity, emotional balance, mutual respect, shared effort. Without those things, love slowly transforms into emotional exhaustion. And this leads directly into the second truth that changes everything once you understand it: the power of your attention. Most men have no idea how valuable their attention really is. They give it away constantly. Endless texting, endless reassurance, endless validation, compliment after compliment, immediate replies at all hours, emotional availability without boundaries. And at first, it feels harmless because society teaches men that pursuing harder proves sincerity. But psychologically, something else happens. Human beings value what feels scarce. They protect what feels earned. And they often overlook what becomes too available. That's not manipulation. That's human psychology. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever noticed how people often take consistency for granted? The friend who's always available gets appreciated less than the friend whose time feels limited. The employee who constantly overextends themselves often gets respected less than the one who sets boundaries. Familiarity without boundaries can quietly reduce perceived value. Relationships work similarly. When a man floods a woman with nonstop attention before she's emotionally invested, he accidentally removes mystery, tension, and emotional space. She never has the opportunity to wonder about him because he's always there trying to prove himself. And here's the painful irony. The more he chases reassurance, the less secure he actually becomes. Because now his emotional state depends on responses, on texts, on reactions, on validation. That's emotional dependency disguised as romance. A woman once admitted something fascinating during a conversation about dating. She said, "The men I became obsessed with weren't the ones constantly trying to impress me. It was the men who seemed fully engaged in their own lives." That statement reveals a deep psychological truth. People are naturally drawn toward emotional stability, toward grounded energy, toward individuals whose identity doesn't revolve entirely around external approval. This is why purpose matters so much in attraction. When a man has goals, discipline, hobbies, ambitions, friendships, and self-respect, his attention becomes more meaningful because it's intentional, not desperate. He's not handing it out compulsively to fill emotional emptiness. He's choosing where it goes, and women feel that difference immediately. One energy says, "Please choose me so I can feel worthy." The other says, "I value connection, but I also value myself." That second energy changes everything. Now let's make this practical because awareness without action changes nothing. If you constantly feel anxious in dating or relationships, ask yourself these questions honestly. Are you over-texting because you genuinely want connection? Or because silence makes you uncomfortable? Are you giving excessive compliments because you admire her? Or because you're trying to secure her approval? Are you sacrificing your routines, goals, and peace just to maintain someone's attention? Those questions matter because many men confuse emotional attachment with emotional addiction, and addiction always creates instability. A grounded man can love deeply without losing himself. He can care without obsessing. He can desire someone without worshiping them. That balance is rare, and rare energy is magnetic. Now here's where things become even more important. Because once a man begins protecting his attention, another shift must happen alongside it. Emotional control. This is the truth that separates respected men from emotionally manipulated men. For generations, men have been conditioned to believe emotional intensity proves love. If she pulls away, chase harder. If she becomes cold, panic. If she threatens to leave, beg her to stay. Many men think dramatic emotional reactions demonstrate devotion, but emotionally intelligent women don't respect emotional chaos. They may temporarily influence it, but deep down, they trust emotional steadiness. And this is where many relationship games begin. Sometimes people consciously test boundaries. Sometimes they do it unconsciously. But either way, human beings observe emotional reactions constantly. If someone knows silence makes you panic, silence becomes power. If they know jealousy makes you irrational, jealousy becomes leverage. If they know your fear of abandonment controls your behavior, they can influence your decisions without ever raising their voice. That's why emotional control is not about suppressing feelings. It's about mastering your responses. And we're going deeper into the exact behaviors that instantly shift relationship power, why self-respect changes attraction completely, and the hidden reason emotionally unavailable men often appear more desirable than emotionally needy men. But before you move on, I want you to comment below with one word: awake. Because once you start seeing these patterns clearly, you can never go back to being emotionally blind again. And if this conversation is already changing how you see relationships, subscribe to Lauren Mind Game, because is where everything truly comes together. Now let's continue, because this next truth may be the one that changes your relationships forever. A man who cannot control his emotions will always be vulnerable to manipulation. Not because emotions are weak, but because uncontrolled emotions make you predictable, and predictability gives other people power over your decisions. Think about how many men lose themselves after a breakup. They stop eating properly, stop focusing on work, stop sleeping peacefully. Their entire emotional world collapses because one person pulled away. That reaction reveals something deeper than heartbreak. It reveals emotional dependency. And I want to say something carefully here because this matters. There is nothing wrong with feeling pain. There is nothing weak about grief, disappointment, sadness, or heartbreak. The problem begins when your emotions become the steering wheel of your life instead of information guiding your awareness. Emotionally grounded men feel deeply. They simply refuse to let temporary emotions control permanent decisions. That difference changes everything. Picture two men facing the exact same situation. A woman suddenly becomes distant. Her texts become shorter. Her energy changes. The first man immediately spirals. He sends multiple messages asking what's wrong. He over-explains himself. He apologizes for things he didn't even do because he's terrified of losing her. Every action screams fear. The second man notices the change too. But instead of panicking, He observes calmly. He gives space. He maintains his routines. He continues focusing on his purpose, his health, his peace. And when he speaks from composure instead of desperation. Now, ask yourself honestly, which man appears emotionally secure? Which man feels safer to be around? Which man seems like he respects himself? This is why emotional control is one of the most attractive traits any human being can develop. Calmness communicates strength, not loud strength, not performative toughness, real strength, the kind that doesn't collapse under pressure. And women notice this far more than men realize. A woman may not consciously say, "I'm testing his emotional regulation," but human beings naturally observe stability. We observe how people respond to discomfort, conflict, stress, disappointment, uncertainty. Those moments reveal character more than charm ever could. I once heard a story about a couple arguing at a restaurant. The woman raised her voice, emotionally escalating the situation, expecting the man to react aggressively back. But instead, he stayed calm. He didn't insult her, didn't beg, didn't lose control. He simply said, "We can talk when we both calm down," and walked outside for air. Later, she admitted something surprising. She said his composure made her respect him more because she realized he wasn't emotionally ruled by the moment. That's emotional maturity. And, unfortunately, many men confuse emotional control with emotional suppression. They think becoming stoic means becoming cold, disconnected, or numb. That's not strength. True emotional mastery means you fully feel your emotions without becoming enslaved by them. You acknowledge anger without becoming destructive. You acknowledge sadness without collapsing. You acknowledge fear without surrendering your dignity. That's power. And here's the deeper truth most people miss. Emotional control doesn't just protect your relationships, it protects your identity. Because every time you abandon your standards out of fear, every time you beg for affection, every time you tolerate disrespect because you're scared to lose someone, you teach yourself that your value depends on external validation, and eventually, that destroys self-respect. Which brings us to the fourth truth, the reality of options. One of the most dangerous beliefs many men carry is the idea that losing one woman means losing everything. That mindset creates scarcity, and scarcity creates desperation. A desperate man tolerates behavior he should walk away from. He accepts disrespect he should never normalize. He lowers his standards because he fears loneliness more than dysfunction. And the tragedy is, many men don't even realize they're operating from fear until the relationship completely consumes them. But psychologically healthy men understand something different. They understand that abundance begins internally before it appears externally. Let me explain. Some men think having options only means attracting multiple women, but true options are deeper than that. Options mean emotional independence. Options mean knowing your life still has meaning, purpose, direction, and value whether someone stays or leaves. That mindset changes your entire energy, because when you stop viewing one person as your only source of happiness, you stop clinging. You stop negotiating your dignity. You stop tolerating emotional chaos just to avoid being alone. And ironically, that's often when attraction increases. Why? Because confidence is emotionally calming. Desperation is emotionally heavy. A man who genuinely believes he can rebuild after loss carries himself differently. He speaks differently. He makes decisions differently. He doesn't collapse every time a relationship faces tension because his entire identity isn't attached to someone else's approval. This is why self-development matters so much. The gym isn't just about muscles. Financial growth isn't just about money. Discipline isn't just about productivity. These things build self-trust, and self-trust changes how you move through relationships. When you know you can survive heartbreak, rebuild after rejection, create meaning after endings, you stop fearing loss so intensely, and fearlessness creates emotional freedom. Now, I know what some people are thinking. But Lauren, doesn't this make relationships transactional? No, it makes them conscious. There's a difference. Unconscious relationships are driven by fear, dependency, insecurity, fantasy, and emotional chaos. Conscious relationships are built through awareness, standards, communication, reciprocity, and mutual respect. The goal is not to stop loving. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself while loving. That distinction is everything. And now we arrive at the final truth. The truth that ties all the others together. Self-respect. Without self-respect, every other lesson collapses. You can learn emotional control. You can understand attraction. You can build confidence. You can improve your appearance and communication skills. But if deep down you still believe you must tolerate disrespect to keep someone, you will betray yourself the moment fear appears. And people can sense that immediately. A man without self-respect becomes emotionally negotiable. He says he has standards, but abandons them when he's afraid of losing her. He says honesty matters, but ignores lies because he's emotionally attached. He says loyalty matters, but tolerates betrayal because he fears being alone. That internal contradiction destroys confidence from the inside out. Self-respect means your values remain stable even when emotions become intense. It means you can love someone deeply while still being willing to walk away from behavior that destroys your peace. And yes, that's painful sometimes, but protecting your dignity often requires temporary discomfort. One of the saddest things to witness is a man slowly shrinking himself to maintain a relationship. He becomes quieter, less confident, less ambitious, less authentic. He tolerates emotional chaos for so long that he forgets who he used to be before the relationship began. That is not love. That is self-abandonment. Real love should expand your spirit, not erase it. A healthy partner should inspire growth, not emotional imprisonment. And I need you to hear this clearly, because this may be the sentence that stays with you long after this video ends. Never sacrifice your identity just to maintain someone's temporary affection, because affection that requires self-betrayal is never sustainable. And this is why boundaries matter so much psychologically. Boundaries are not punishments. They are self-respect in action. When you calmly communicate what you will and won't tolerate, you teach people how to engage with you. And emotionally healthy people respect clarity. Now, will some people leave when you develop standards? Absolutely. But that's not failure. That's filtration. When you raise your standards, you naturally remove people who only benefited from your lack of them. Read that again mentally. Because many men think losing access to unhealthy relationships means they lost something valuable. In reality, they often lost confusion, manipulation, inconsistency, and emotional instability. Peace is not a loss. And here's where everything finally connects. When you understand conditional love, you stop idealizing people blindly. When you value your attention, you stop giving your energy recklessly. When you master emotional control, you stop reacting impulsively. When you recognize your options, you stop operating from scarcity. And when you develop self-respect, you stop negotiating your dignity for temporary validation. That combination creates something powerful. A man who is emotionally grounded, and emotionally grounded men are difficult to manipulate because they no longer fear the things manipulation depends on. They don't fear silence the same way. They don't fear rejection the same way. They don't fear walking away the same way. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally started valuing themselves too. Now let me make something very important clear before we finish. The healthiest relationships are not power struggles. They are partnerships. The goal is not for men to win against women. The goal is for emotionally mature people to stop playing destructive games altogether. Because once manipulation disappears, something beautiful becomes possible. Honesty, safety, consistency, trust, peace. That is real connection. Real masculine energy is not loud domination. It's calm leadership, emotional steadiness, integrity, purpose, self-respect. the ability to remain grounded without becoming cold. And the men who develop those traits rarely need to chase attention because their energy naturally commands respect. So if you've made it this far, I want you to do something important. Take a moment and ask yourself honestly, where in your life have you been abandoning yourself just to keep someone else comfortable? That question can change your future if you answer it truthfully. And if this video spoke to you deeply, make sure you subscribe to Lauren Mind Game, because this channel is about helping you understand psychology, relationships, emotional intelligence, and the hidden dynamics that silently shape human behavior every single day. Like this video if you're done settling for confusion. Share it with someone who needs this awakening. And in the comments, tell me which truth hit you the hardest. Was it emotional control, self-respect, conditional love, the power of attention, or finally realizing you have more options than fear has been telling you? Because the moment a man becomes aware of his value, the games begin to lose their power. And when the games lose their power, peace finally begins.